1918, Bourlon, France. A young Canadian officer ran through machine gun fire, charging a German stronghold. He was alone. When the smoke cleared, 31 enemy soldiers had surrendered. George Fraser Kerr had done something that no one would forget, an act of courage that would earn him the Victoria Cross. But who was this quiet man from Deseronto, Ontario? And how did a life marked by bravery end in sudden tragedy back home in Toronto? I'm Stephanie Allen, and this is Dead Canadians Carved in Stone, where we uncover the heroism, the history, and the mystery of lives carved in stone. George Fraser Kerr was born on June 8, 1895, in Deseronto, Ontario, a small community on the Bay of Quinte. By the time George was born, the town's mills were in decline, the forests were depleted, the terracotta factory had burnt down. Basically, the best days of the town were behind it. George was the son of Isabella Fraser and John James Kerr. Isabella and John had a number of different professions over the years, and when we look back through census records, we find that John is listed as a farmer, a dry goods clerk, a general merchant, a salesman on the road. He did a number of different things. Suffice it to say, he did what he needed to feed his family. In 1902, the family moved to Toronto, and then later to Galt, which is now Cambridge, Ontario. George attended Galt Collegiate Institute and Vocational School from 1908 to 1913, and he was described as a bright, quiet, and determined young man. He studied chemistry and found work as a laboratory assistant after he graduated. But like so many young Canadians in 1914, George could not have imagined that the distant quarrel in Europe would soon pull him into the mud and blood of the Western Front. When Britain declared war on Germany in August 1914, Canada answered the call immediately. And on September 22, 1914, 19-year-old George Kerr enlisted in the 3rd Battalion, Central Ontario Regiment, of the newly formed Canadian Expeditionary Force. He was assigned regimental number 9574. Private George Fraser Kerr was just 19 years old. The 3rd Battalion trained at Valcartier Camp in Quebec. In October 1914, Kerr and his comrades sailed aboard the SS Tunisian for England. Only 4 months later, in February 1915, he found himself in the front lines at Ypres, a name that would soon become synonymous with Canada's baptism by fire: the Western Front. George Fraser Kerr arrived in France in 1915, stepping into the chaos of trench warfare, mud, blood, and the constant whistle of bullets overhead. From the start, he distinguished himself in the moments that tested men's courage. The war turned boys into leaders, and George proved himself time and time again. He would go on to become one of Canada's most decorated soldiers in the First World War, earning the Military Medal, the Military Cross and Bar, and eventually the Victoria Cross. Each medal was a testament to Kerr facing danger in ways that he had never imagined. June 1916, Military Medal. At the Battle of Sorrel, Kerr's platoon came under relentless German attack. When his officer was wounded and his sergeant killed, Corporal Kerr took command. He held a bombing post through the entire day of assault, keeping his men alive and his position secure. For this extraordinary courage, he received the Military Medal, his first recognition of bravery. Only weeks later, on July 28, 1916, he was badly wounded. Many believed that his war was over. But George Kerr was far from finished. August 1917, Hill 70. Earlier in 1917, the Canadians were also involved in the Battle of Hill 70. The objective was to capture the high ground and force German forces into costly counterattacks. The Canadians led the operations using coordinated artillery, creeping barrages, and gas attacks to dislodge entrenched Germans. Kerr's battalion, like others in the Canadian Corps, endured heavy shelling and fierce counterattacks. Casualties were significant. Approximately 9,000 Canadians were killed or wounded, while German losses were estimated to be about 25,000. This battle demonstrated Canadian operational skill and foreshadowed their critical role in the 100 Days Offensive. October and November of 1917, Passchendaele. Later that year, Kerr's unit took part in the final stages of the Battle of Passchendaele, one of the most infamous engagements of the war. Canadians were tasked with capturing Passchendaele Ridge, advancing across waterlogged fields, which were churned into mud by rain and shell fire. Despite horrific conditions, Kerr and his comrades pressed forward under relentless fire, capturing key objectives at tremendous cost. Canadian casualties in the campaign were estimated to be over 15,000, underscoring the extreme human toll. The operation became a symbol of endurance and determination under unimaginable conditions. August 1918, Battle of Amiens, Military Cross. After recovering in England, Kerr was commissioned as an officer. On August 1st, 1917, he became Lieutenant Kerr of the 3rd Battalion. He rejoined his regiment in time for the Battle of Amiens, which began on the 8th of August 1918, as the opening salvo of the Allies' 100-day offensive. This was a coordinated Allied campaign where Canadian troops played a key role in breaking through German lines, with infantry, tanks, and artillery working in close coordination. Kerr, although wounded, refused evacuation and led his platoon forward and captured an enemy battery. For this feat, he was awarded the Military Cross. This award reflects his exceptional leadership and composure under fire. September 1918, the Drocourt-Quéant line, bar to the Military Cross. Less than 1 month later, Kerr earned a bar to his Military Cross during the attack on the Drocourt-Quéant line. This was part of the Canadian contribution to the 100 Days Offensive, which was a relentless push by Allied forces to break the German front in northern France. Canadian troops faced fortified positions, barbed wire, machine guns, and deep trench networks. Kerr pressed forward, leading his men through obstacles and keeping the advance moving. Casualties were high. Battalions sometimes lost 25 to 40% of their men in these attacks. Yet Kerr continued to push forward, demonstrating endurance and leadership under these extreme conditions. The Victoria Cross. Heroism at Bourlon Wood. By early September 1918, the Canadian Corps was driving the Allied advance during the 100 Days Offensive. Lieutenant George Fraser Kerr's unit approached Bourlon Wood, which was a heavily fortified German strongpoint. The area was defended with machine guns, barbed wire, and fully entrenched positions. The fighting would be fierce. During the attack, Kerr charged forward through heavy fire, engaging the enemy and clearing obstacles that blocked his platoon's advance. By the end of the engagement, 31 German soldiers had surrendered, and the Canadian line had gained a critical foothold. Bourlon Wood was one of the many operations during the 100 Days Offensive, a period when Canadian forces repeatedly pushed German lines back, often under heavy fire. Yet Kerr continued leading and coordinating his men throughout this engagement. Kerr's heroism at Bourlon Wood was not an isolated act. It was the culmination of years of daring under fire. From Sorrel to Amiens to Drocourt-Quéant, a man whose courage would be remembered long after the last shot was fired. The Victoria Cross, the highest honor. For his extraordinary bravery at Bourlon Wood on the 27th of September, 1918, George Fraser Kerr was awarded the Victoria Cross, the highest military honor in the British Empire. This was a moment that recognized the full measure of his courage. In May 1919, Kerr received his medal personally from King George V at Buckingham Palace. Kerr was one of only 70 Canadians to receive the Victoria Cross in World War I. Homecoming, the ordinary hero. George Fraser Kerr survived the war and returned to Canada a hero, but a wounded one. He was declared medically unfit and left the army on the 16th of July, 1919. He was only 24, yet already one of the most decorated officers in the country. He married Mary Beeman on March 6, 1924, and became a father to 2 daughters, Mary Louise Isabel, born in 1925, and Janet Grace, born in 1927. Friends remembered him as reserved but good-humored, a man who rarely spoke of the horrors he had endured overseas. Despite the extraordinary feats that he accomplished on the battlefield, when he returned home to Toronto, he lived the life of an ordinary man. He worked as a metal broker, supplying materials across Toronto. He continued his service in the Toronto Regiment, which was a militia unit. He was a father, a husband, a colleague, and an all-round good citizen. Tragically, George Fraser Kerr's life was cut short in a quiet, domestic accident. On December 8th, 1929, while warming up his car in his house in suburban Toronto, he succumbed to carbon monoxide poisoning. Police suspect that wind had closed the door of the garage while he was warming up his car. He was just 34 years old. Kerr was laid to rest with full military honors at Mount Pleasant Cemetery. His final resting place is Plot 14, Section 36, Lot 6, and his stone is marked with a large Victoria Cross. The contrast is striking. A man who faced machine gun fire, barbed wire, poisonous gas, and some of the most horrific battles of World War I met his end in a quiet suburban garage in Toronto. Kerr's heroism was extraordinary, but his death reminds us that even the greatest of soldiers are at their core ordinary people. Their husbands, fathers, next-door neighbors. And their lives can be changed even in the most mundane of circumstances. We honor Captain George Fraser Kerr VC, soldier, hero, and in many ways, just an ordinary Ontarian. From a small-town boy to a national hero, his life reminds us that courage often comes quietly. His story is written not only in medals and military records, but it's represented right here in stone, a lasting reminder of sacrifice and the fragile peace it secures. The next time you're in Toronto, visit Mount Pleasant Cemetery and find his plot, or head to Deseronto or Cambridge to see one of his commemorative plaques. Pause, reflect, and remember the courage that ordinary Canadians can carry. If you enjoyed this episode of Dead Canadians Carved in Stone, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell to be notified of future episodes. Share this video with friends and family so more people can learn about the Canadians who shaped our history. You can find us at deadcanadians.ca on Facebook or Instagram. Let us know in the comments which Canadians you think we should feature next. I'm Stephanie Allen, and this has been Dead Canadians Carved in Stone, where we dig into the history and the mystery of lives carved in stone.